Today, a sister sent to us her experience, and God by His mercies revealed and confirmed to her what will happen in the year 2025. To fully understand her experience, kindly stay to the end. No part have been taken, no part have been added. My name is Linda Alex. My early childhood was, by most accounts, fairly ordinary, filled with the innocent joys and carefree moments that one would expect. I played with my friends in the neighborhood, laughed at silly jokes, and dreamed of the future with the boundless optimism that only a child can have. But amidst the laughter and games, there was always an undercurrent of something more serious, something that made my life different from the other kids. I was born with a terminal sickness, a condition that required regular checkups and a constant stream of medication. From as early as I can remember, hospitals and doctors became a routine part of my life. While other children played without a care, my body betrayed me, where each day was a balance between hope and uncertainty. My parents tried their best to shield me from the gravity of my condition. They would put on brave faces and tell me that everything would be okay, that the doctors were doing everything they could to make me better. But even as a child, I could sense the strain in their voices, the worry in their eyes. I knew that my sickness was not something that could be easily fixed, that my life was a fragile thread that could be snapped at any moment. The real turning point in my childhood came when my parents separated. I was still very young, too young to fully understand what was happening, but old enough to feel the impact of their decision. One day my father was there, and the next, he was gone. The home that had once been filled with the sounds of laughter and warmth suddenly became cold and quiet. I remember the confusion, the sense of loss that settled deep in my heart. I didn't understand why my parents, who had always seemed so strong and united, were now living separate lives. It was as if the foundation of my world had been shaken, leaving me feeling unsteady and unsure. My mother tried to explain things to me, to assure me that both she and my father still loved me, but their words couldn't erase the pain I felt. The separation brought with it a new kind of loneliness. My father, who had been my protector, was no longer there to comfort me during my darkest moments. I had to grow up quickly, learning to cope with my illness and the emotional turmoil of my parents' separation on my own. It was a lot for a young child to bear, and I often felt overwhelmed by the weight of it all. As if the illness and the separation weren't enough, my life took another dark turn when I began to encounter something I can only describe as darkness. It wasn't a physical darkness, but a shadow that seemed to seep into my mind and spirit, consuming the light that had once been there. I would wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, feeling as though something was watching me, lurking just beyond the edges of my consciousness. At first, I tried to dismiss it as a child's overactive imagination, but the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. The darkness brought with it nightmares, vivid and terrifying dreams that left me trembling with fear. In these dreams, I would see shadowy figures, hear voices whispering things I couldn't understand but instinctively knew were filled with malice. I tried to talk to my mother about it, but she was so consumed with her own pain that she couldn't see the depth of my fear. The trauma of these experiences began to take a toll on me. I became withdrawn, afraid to sleep, afraid to be alone. My once carefree childhood was now a battleground, where I fought daily against the darkness that threatened to consume me. The combination of my illness, the separation of my parents, and these encounters with darkness left deep scars on my young soul, scars that I would carry with me for the rest of my life. The trauma that had been building within me finally reached a breaking point. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of pain and fear, with no way to escape. The first encounter I had with death led me to hell, before the second out-of-body experience where I meet Jesus and He told and confirmed to me what will happen in 2025. On the first encounter, I was 14 years of age. One night, the weight of it all became too much to bear. I remember lying in bed, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing with thoughts that I couldn't control. The darkness that had been my constant companion was now suffocating me, wrapping itself around me like a thick, heavy blanket. I felt as though I couldn't breathe, as though my very life was slipping away. Suddenly, everything went black, and I felt a strange sensation, as if I was being pulled out of my own body. It was as if I was floating above myself, looking down at my lifeless form lying on the bed. I felt a deep sense of detachment, as though the physical world no longer held any meaning for me. But this out-of-body experience was not peaceful or calming. Instead, I was overwhelmed by a sense of dread, a feeling that something terrible was about to happen. I could feel myself being pulled away, further and further from the life I had known, into a place that was cold and dark, a place that filled me with unimaginable terror. Before I knew it, I found myself in a place that I can only describe as hell. It was a realm of utter despair, filled with the cries of souls in torment. The heat was unbearable, searing my very soul. All around me, I could see people, countless souls, suffering in ways that I could never have imagined. Their eyes filled with regret and hopelessness. As I stood there, I realized that I too was in hell. I could feel the same torment, the same regret, weighing heavily on me. The darkness that had haunted me for so long now seemed to consume me entirely. The souls around me wailed in sorrow. They were trapped, just as I was, in a never-ending cycle of torment. I could see the pain in their eyes, the realization that they were suffering for their actions, for the choices they had made in life. I felt their anguish as if it were my own, and I knew that I was just another lost soul, condemned to this place of eternal suffering. I don't know how long I was there. Time seemed to lose all meaning in that terrible place, but every moment felt like an eternity. The fear, the pain, the regret, it all became too much for me to bear. I wanted to scream, to beg for mercy, but I knew that no one would hear me, that there was no escape from this hellish existence. Just when I thought all hope was lost, I suddenly found myself back in my body, lying on my bed, drenched in sweat, my heart racing. It was as if I had been violently ripped from the clutches of hell and thrust back into the world of the living. The experience had shaken me to my core, leaving me trembling with fear and confusion. I couldn't shake the images of what I had seen, the sounds of those tormented souls still echoed in my mind. The fear of returning to that place haunted me day and night. I knew that I needed to do something, to find a way to escape the fate that I had seen. I needed to find solace, to find some kind of hope in the midst of the despair that had taken hold of my life. Desperate for answers, I turned to the only place I thought could offer me some relief, the church. I began attending services regularly, seeking comfort in the words of the pastor, hoping that somehow, through prayer and faith, I could find a way to avoid the fate that I had witnessed. The church became my refuge, a place where I could find a sense of peace, even if it was only temporary. I prayed fervently, asking God for forgiveness, for guidance, for anything that could keep me from returning to that place of torment. I listened intently to the sermons, clinging to the hope that through faith, I could find redemption, that I could be saved from the darkness that had nearly consumed me. I grew up in constant battle of life. When I turned 24 last year November, that's 2024. The weight of my past traumas, coupled with the relentless pressures of my present, bore down on me like a crushing boulder. The spiritual journey I had embarked on, though filled with moments of enlightenment, could not erase the deep scars left by years of abuse and suffering. I felt like I was drowning, unable to find solid ground, no matter how hard I tried. The pain, both physical and emotional, was a constant, gnawing presence that never seemed to fade. In those dark days, I often found myself questioning everything, my purpose, my existence, the very fabric of the reality I lived in. The world felt like a cold and indifferent place, and the spiritual solace I once found in my practices seemed distant and unreachable. The connection I had felt with the earth and the spirits had waned, replaced by a deep sense of isolation and despair. I reached a point where I could no longer see a way out. The thought of continuing on this painful journey seemed impossible, and I began to entertain the idea of ending it all. The notion that death could offer a release, a final escape from the relentless torment, grew increasingly appealing. I convinced myself that it was the only option left, the only way to find peace. One evening, specifically on the 7th of February 2024. After yet another day filled with anguish and hopelessness, I made my decision. I would end the suffering, leave this world behind, and hopefully find the peace that had eluded me in life. It wasn't a rash decision, it was one I had mulled over for weeks, maybe even months. And so, I took the steps necessary to ensure that I would not wake up again, that my suffering would finally come to an end. As the darkness began to overtake me, I felt an unusual sensation, a detachment from the physical world. My body, heavy with the effects of my actions, seemed to sink, while my consciousness began to rise. The pain and despair that had consumed me started to dissipate, replaced by a strange sense of calm and clarity. I realized, with a startling jolt, that I was no longer confined to my physical form. I looked down and saw my body lying there, motionless and pale, but I felt no fear or sadness, only a deep curiosity and a strange sense of relief. I was floating above it, disconnected from the pain that had once been my constant companion. The world around me seemed different, less solid, more fluid. Colors were more vibrant and sounds more resonant. I felt light, unburdened, as if I had been freed from the chains that had held me down for so long. But as I drifted higher, I became aware of a presence, one that was both familiar and overwhelming. Suddenly, I found myself standing in a place that defied description. It wasn't the heaven of golden gates and clouds that I had heard about in stories, nor was it a place of darkness and fire. It was a realm of immense light, where the very air seemed to hum with energy and power. And there, in the midst of this radiance, stood a figure I immediately recognized, Jesus. His presence was overwhelming yet comforting. He emanated a love so pure, so unconditional, that it brought tears to my eyes. He looked at me with eyes that seemed to see into the very depths of my soul, understanding all my pain, my struggles, and my fears. There was no judgment in his gaze, only compassion and an infinite understanding. Jesus spoke to me, but not in words. His communication was a blend of thoughts, emotions, and images, all woven together in a way that was both profound and indescribable. He told me that my time on earth was not yet over, that there was still much for me to do, and that I had a purpose that I needed to fulfill. He showed me the pain I had endured. But then the vision shifted. Jesus began to show me what was to come, the events that would unfold in the year 2025. The images he revealed were terrifying in their clarity and detail, a glimpse into a future that was both bleak and horrifying. First, I saw vast stretches of land in Africa, once fertile and green, now barren and dry. Famine had struck, leaving millions of people starving. The suffering was immense, with entire regions devoid of life, the land cracked and parched under sun. The people, gaunt and hollow-eyed, searched desperately for food and water, but found none. Jesus told me that this famine would affect many African countries, bringing about a humanitarian crisis of unprecedented scale. Secondly, he showed me how the earth itself began to tremble and shake. I saw 3 nations, Japan, Turkey, and the United States, each ravaged by massive earthquakes. In Japan, the ground split open, swallowing buildings whole, and the sea rose up in a monstrous wave, crashing down upon the land with a force that obliterated everything in its path. Turkey fared no better, leaving behind nothing but ruins and rubble. The United States, too, was not spared, as a massive quake tore through the western states, reducing once thriving metropolises to piles of debris. The devastation was immense and the loss of life staggering. He also showed me floods sweeping across continents, washing away homes, crops, and entire communities. I saw the rivers of Europe and Asia overflow, turning cities into lakes and farmlands into swamps. The water was relentless, claiming lives by the thousands, leaving behind only destruction and sorrow. Then I saw the wars spreading like wildfire across the globe. Nations turned against each other, and civil unrest erupted in countries that had once been stable. The violence was unimaginable, streets filled with the dead and dying, cities burning, and the air thick with the smoke of destruction. The wars were fueled by hatred, greed, and a thirst for power, and they claimed countless lives, leaving the world in chaos and ruin. Finally, Jesus showed me a vision of a new pandemic, one far worse than COVID-19. This disease spread rapidly, mutating faster than scientists could develop vaccines. It attacked the body with a viciousness that was unparalleled, causing symptoms that were far more severe than anything I had ever seen. Hospitals were overwhelmed, healthcare systems collapsed, and entire cities were quarantined. The death toll was staggering, far surpassing the numbers seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. The fear and panic were real, as people desperately tried to protect themselves from an invisible enemy that showed no mercy. As these visions unfolded before me, I felt a deep sense of dread, but also a strange calm. Jesus revealed to me that these events were not a fix and unchanged, that they could be changed through prayer, repentance, and a return to faith. He spoke of the need for compassion, for love, and for a renewed commitment to the principles of faith and humanity. When the visions finally subsided, Jesus looked at me once more, his eyes filled with a love that was almost unbearable in its intensity. He told me that I had been given this knowledge for a reason, that it was my responsibility to share what I had seen and to help others prepare for what was to come. And then, with a final, gentle touch, he sent me back to my body. I woke up to see myself in the hospital. God's mercy saved me. My mom told me when I took the pills, she felt an uncomfortable sensation came over her while at work, so she decided to rush home and she meet me lying on the floor. She then rushed me to the hospital. As I sit and reflect on the path I've traveled, from childhood struggles, near-death experiences, and encounters, I have learned that every experience, no matter how painful or joyful, has shaped me into who I am today, a soul deeply connected to God. Fully aware of my purpose, and committed to helping others find their way. To all Christians and intercessors, take your prayer life seriously and commit to it with dedication. The revelations God gave me are not merely warnings, they are a divine call to action. God has revealed these things to us not to cause fear, but to awaken us to the urgent need for prayer and intercession. The enemy's desire is to bring about calamity and suffering on a global scale, but we have the power to prevent it through earnest and persistent prayer. Let us, therefore, unite in prayer, standing together as one body in Christ, to combat the forces of darkness that seek to undermine our world. Intercessors, your role is critical. Pray without ceasing, for your prayers are a powerful force in changing the course of events. The divine has entrusted us with the responsibility to stand in the gap, to plead for mercy, and to seek divine intervention. Unity and love must be our guiding principles. Let us remember that we are called to love one another deeply and to support each other in our spiritual journeys. The strength of our collective prayers and the depth of our unity will determine the impact we have in shaping a future aligned with God's will. Each of us must remain committed to serving God with sincerity and devotion. I am honored to have shared my experience. This brings us to the end of today's experience. We ask that you share this to bless someone out there. If you have not subscribed to our channel, kindly do so to get notified anytime we share experiences like this. Thank you.